everybody, it's Sarah, and today I have a little review for you, and that review is of Green Rider by Kristen Britton. This is the first book in the Green Rider series, of which I believe there are currently like 5 books out. I don't know if the series is finished or not, but yeah, this is the first book in any case. So I read this book back in August and I surprisingly really enjoyed it. I don't know why I said surprisingly, because, you know, I went into this really expecting nothing pretty much, but I was just like really blown away. I just really enjoyed my time with this book. But before we get into why I enjoyed my time with this book so much, let me tell you just very quickly a little bit of a summary of what this book is about. And also, as always, my review is spoiler free, so do not worry for spoilers. So this is an adult high fantasy series. However, it is one of those fantasy series from the early 2000s, before YA and fantasy really, you know, grabbed a hold, and before we really had YA as a specific category within fantasy. I believe if this was written now, it would probably be written more suitable for a YA audience, also because our main character is, I believe, like 16 or 17 years old. At the beginning of the story, she still goes to school. However, because it was written in the early 2000s, there is some pretty heavy and gruesome content matter in this book, especially when it comes to sexual assault. So I would also put trigger warnings for sexual assault in this book, or for this book, if that is something that you worry about. The story follows Kerrigan, who kind of runs from her boarding school after a fight she had with a fellow classmate. However, while she's walking through the woods, kind of in the general direction of home, she's surprised by a rider in a green cloak, one of the famous king's messengers. This green cloak, however, has 2 black arrows in his back, and just before he dies, he makes Kerrigan promise to take a message that he has to the king, and it is of utmost importance that this message gets to the king, because it's about life and death, it's about treason, it's about all the big things. And so Kerrigan just kind of suddenly sees herself thrown into the situation where she is being pursued by some magical creatures, also some humans, and she's a bit in over her head, not gonna lie. So that is kind of the setup of the story, and now let's get into why I love this story so much. But before I get into that, I want to talk about like the 1 or 2 negative things that I had with this book that I was kind of like not too sure about that. And that is that this book is oddly pro-monarchy. I mean, it's fantasy, so maybe oddly isn't the right word, but it's been a while since I've seen something that's this on the nose about it. There's this faction of humans in this book that just, you know, they want to abolish the monarchy. And the way they are portrayed in the book is just kind of stupid, kind of dumb, very antagonistic. And the only thing they want is pretty much actually just socialism, to be honest. Which, by the way, there's also some very pro-capitalist vibes in this book as well, because Kerrigan is a merchant's daughter, and she's always like, well, my dad worked for his wealth, like, what are you doing so you can get to money? Like, stop complaining. It's just, you can do it if you just work hard enough, which, yeah, we all know how that is. However, since it is just such a minor part of this first book, I'll see how big it gets in future books, but at least in this first book it's pretty minor, so I was able to just, like, you know, look away a little bit with those parts. But those parts were really something where I wasn't the biggest fan. Also, if you're one of those people who really doesn't like age gap relationships, I mean, there's not really a romance in this first book, but I think there's gonna be a romance in the future, which I think is gonna be a bit of an age gap romance. So if that isn't your thing, then, you know, maybe also don't pick up this book. But now, in terms of why I love this story so much, to be honest, I mean, first of all, I just love Kerrigan a lot. There's multiple characters who describe her as surviving off of spunk and will alone, which, to be honest, describes her to a T. Kerrigan is so far in over her head. She has no clue what is going on. However, she's just stubborn enough to get through everything, so I just really enjoyed her as a main character. Kerrigan also is just the type of character, to be honest, that I would probably just have loved as a teenager, because she, you know, she can do things, she can get things done. She maybe isn't the best sword fighter yet, because she's never really fought that much with a sword. Like, she's a good beginner and she has talent, but, you know, she's not there yet to be a master swordswoman. But I just really like her, and the way she's written, she doesn't fall into the not like other girls trap that a lot of early fantasy in this direction falls into. So I really appreciate that. I also really like the other side characters. Most of the side characters don't appear that much, which actually brings me to the next thing, or I'll just mention something that I'll go more into depth later on. This book is very much written like a hero's journey, so there's not a lot of characters that really go with her through the whole journey. She is mostly on her own, and in different phases of her hero's journey she meets different people, and I just love all of those people because they are tropes in their purest forms, and that is what I love about this the most. This book just relishes in being fantasy. It doesn't subvert too many tropes. It doesn't do that much, to be honest. Like, it's the hero's journey, it's Kerrigan, and if she needs to meet two weird sisters who give her weird objects that might help her in the future, then she's gonna meet two weird sisters that give her weird objects that might help her in the future if she's in trouble. And it's like, it's that type of story. And nowadays I feel like there's so much fantasy that is almost embarrassed to be fantasy, where we have to subvert everything and everything has to be grimdark and it's not allowed to be magical and whimsical anymore. And it's just, you know, I love that this was just that. This was just magical and whimsical, and you have magic in this world, but it's not really over-explained whatsoever. It's not made all scientific and you have to explain every little detail of how everything works. It's just there, and it sometimes works. And don't get me wrong, when I talk about this being magical and whimsical, it's not like Harry Potter where there's rules made up, but if you need it, those rules don't apply. Like, you still have the feeling there's rules, and you still have the feeling there's reasons why certain things work and why those things don't work at other times, but, you know, those reasons aren't necessarily explained, because Kerrigan isn't interested why those things work, so why should we be interested why those things work? So yeah, I just love how magical and how fantasy, how quintessentially fantasy this book was, because it's just been a really long time since I read a book like this. And yeah, it's maybe not the most groundbreaking fantasy, like, it does a lot of very tropey things, but that's exactly what the charm of this book is, to be honest. There's also a lot of things that are just blatantly similar to Tolkien and to Lord of the Rings, but, you know, there's a lot of that in a lot of fantasy, especially from that time. So yeah, I just overall really loved this book, and I can really recommend it if you want a break from grimdark fantasy. That doesn't mean that there isn't also darkness in this book. It's just not like all is hopeless, everyone is just morally great. No, it's just, you know, it just is, and the villain is a very mustache twirling villain. It's whatever. It's just, it's beautiful and tropey, and I love it. And yeah, that was it for my review. If you have read this book, tell me your thoughts on it in the comments down below. If you haven't read the book, tell me, did I make you want to pick it up? If you enjoyed this video, maybe think about giving me a thumbs up and also maybe subscribing. All the links to my social media, as well as to my book club of Queens, Witches and Valkyries, where you read one adult high fantasy book written by a woman or genderqueer person per month, will be left linked down below. So go and check those out too. And with all of that said, I hope I'll see you very soon. Bye!